Welcome to Psychologist Talks. On today's episode, I want to talk about the link between cat ownership and schizophrenia. Now, if you're like, wait, excuse me, what? That's a little bit of a misleading title. You know what we do these days as content creators. We try to drag you in. Now, it is technically true. Cat ownership can be linked to it, but we're talking about an indirect mechanism. We're talking about a parasite that cats carry called Toxoplasma Gondii. I always get this wrong. I think there's different ways to pronounce it. Let me look. Gondii, but I think Gondii is what some people say. Anyway, it's a parasite that actually more than cats carry. A lot of animals carry it, but what is unique about cats, and I don't mean just domesticated cats, we're talking about any feline, any felid, I think is what they say in the research articles, carries this in them. But unique to cats is that their feces carry the parasite. And so the danger is not in the cat itself, it's the fact that their litter boxes, if we're talking about domesticated cats, can have this parasite in it, which can then transmit to human beings. Now, there are other modes of transmission. This can be tainted vegetables. This is why it is important if you have, organic stuff coming in. While that is probably better controlled in farms, but if it's in your backyard in a raised bed, you need to wash your vegetables. It can also be carried in meats, and this is how cats usually get it. We're talking raw meat, so if something is undercooked, say pork, it can be transmitted to human beings. Now, because if you wash your vegetables and you cook your meat, you're largely okay, minus this area having or owning a cat. Now, I'll talk about two things here. I'll talk about how is this correlated? Because it's not like you own a cat and you touch the feces, you're going to get schizophrenia. It's not that simple. There's more devil in those details. But even then, there is further information that I had to research and find out, because it was like, everybody talks about this link and people are talking about this link, but I'm not getting the specific details about how pervasive the risk actually is. And so I will disclose what I found. Now, full disclosure, this was done augmented with AI. I read a few articles that it cited to make sure I wasn't missing something and it wasn't hallucinating at me. But I just want to be honest and disclose I'm not a neuropsychologist. I do not specialize in this particular parasite and its effects on the brain. This was indeed augmented through AI. So, just disclosure on that. So, what is the link? You're like, holy crap, are you serious if you haven't heard about this? Now, the nature of this parasite is that when it's passed to humans, it can get into the brain. It can actually get into the eyes as well, but it can get into the brain. And within the brain, it can cause lesions. And these lesions are in certain parts of the brain that can be correlated with symptoms of schizophrenia in a way, and that antipsychotic medications can kind of inhibit these sorts of effects, is what some things show. Also, antibodies are produced in our system when we're exposed to things like these parasites, and there's a higher correlation that when people have these antibodies in their system that they have been exposed to this parasite, the incident rates of schizophrenia go up, and even more importantly, that exposure to the parasite immediately preceding and around the time of the development of schizophrenia is correlated too. And so we're not talking just a correlation, but we don't know causal for sure. But there is a very significant link between this parasite and schizophrenia. Now, it is one of numerous factors. So, any reasonable article on this will note, we don't need to be so scared and concerned and say this is the sole singular causal factor. It is probably one of several factors that kind of collide together. Even the research seems to bear this out, where the degree of inflammation caused by the parasite can have links to whether or not, say, schizophrenia could develop. Never mind genetic components of schizophrenia independent of this, and the other sort of black box stuff that we don't even know precisely why, right? Does schizophrenia come up? Why is birth month correlated with the higher incident rates of schizophrenia? I mean, these are still questions we do not have answered, but it is important to note, as scary as it might sound, that exposure to this parasite through cat feces is a risk. It is straight up a risk. Now, I have owned cats for a long time, and this is a scary notion, particularly that I've got, an almost 1-year-old that I'm raising around these said cats, and go, okay, rather than stick my head in the sand here, what truly here is the risk? I mean, is this something that I clean because, I mean, we're talking about excrement here, right? We're talking about feces. I mean, cats get on the countertop. I ain't eating food that falls on the countertop, right? We're talking 101 cleanliness here. But, even if I'm extremely careful around, cleaning the litter box, am I just like flirting with disaster 24/7 here? And once again, the devil here is in the details. Well, it turns out when you go looking into this further, the greater risk is not just cats in general. It is cats that are in the wild, that's particularly outdoor cats. So a lot of this research, we're talking like bobcats and lions and all sorts of stuff. I mean, they're following wild animals. And you see high incident rates of this because they're eating raw meat, right? They're doing what cats do. Well, they also follow studies of intentionally intervening and exposing cats to this, and then seeing what happens. And so they, check the feces and see, does this parasite show up, and so on and so forth. And so the incident rates tend to be higher in those that are out in the wild because they're exposing themselves to, raw meat. They're exposing themselves possibly to feces of other cats, et cetera, et cetera. And thereby there is like a heightened risk through exposure. The other thing, though, is that it's not like if a cat catches it or has this like parasite in it, that it's in it forever and ever and will continue to excrete, right? It will continue, not excrete like through the skin, but it'll continue, like every single bowel movement is dangerous and contains these parasites. Quite differently, when the ingestion occurs, within a certain amount of time, the feces become loaded with these parasites. I think the research said for 1 to 2 weeks. But once that is done, that might be the only what they call quote unquote shedding, and then that's it. That's it. So even though this is in the system, and immune deficiencies and other issues can cause this to resurface, by and large, if a cat is infected once, it is not forever dangerous. And this is very helpful to know. So you have a little bit of a double whammy here, where if your cat is outdoors a lot, it's not like it's forever at risk, but you don't know what it's getting into. And so risk increases substantially, because if it's catching and eating mice or whatever it might be, we don't know what it's getting into. It could be silently coming back infected again, and thereby the feces is dangerous once again to handle. This risk is decreased substantially if your cat is not an outdoor cat, because it's not being exposed to anything. The environmental control is phenomenally high. If you're not feeding it raw meats, all of its food is processed or cooked in some sort of way, and it's not interacting with other cats or even produce that maybe has it. Even if it caught it once, it is not at a perpetual ongoing risk for passing this parasite on to us as human beings. And so while there is this significant risk associated with cat ownership, the devil again is in the details. The risk is probably highest for those that allow their cats to be outdoors. Never mind, again, it requires myriad of sort of other circumstances that compels schizophrenia forward. And on top of that, we're talking more about a developmental issue than it is something that's magically going to hit us at the age of 40 or 50, right? Like the greatest risk factor is around adolescence, early adulthood. It can manifest into like 20s and into 30s, but is exceedingly rare to just spontaneously develop way later in life. And so the danger, once again, depending on you and who all is in your household, is more for younger kids. This is why we know this can be passed from mother to child in utero, and so pregnant women are highly discouraged from dealing with cat litter boxes while they are pregnant. So all of this to say, in summary, there is indeed a risk between cat ownership and the development of schizophrenia. It is one of several factors, and it is most kind of poignant and most pressing in pregnancy, and then subsequently for younger kids. But do not overestimate the risk, because the science says The greater risk is cats that are out and about getting into who knows what and bringing it back into the house. And even if that is the case, if you are sufficiently good with hygiene and being careful with these sorts of things, the risk of transmission becomes quite lower. You cannot touch a cat and catch this. They don't just shed it off their skin if they lick your hand, nothing like that. It is strictly really in the fecal matter of cats. And the risk is much lower, per the research, that if the cat never goes outdoors. Again, all the cats, if you have multiple cats, need to be indoor cats for that to be the case. Otherwise, one could be bringing it in and spreading it to the other cats accordingly, because they're using, more than likely, similar litter boxes. So, if you're paranoid like me and you want to go a step further, part of me was like, all right, so, again, I got an almost 1-year-old. This is slightly concerning to me. I asked AI to say, like, hey, is there any research on transmission through walking, right? Like if they, have a bowel movement and they step in it and they come walking. And there's no research on this whatsoever, probably because if you're listening to everything I've said before, the amount of risk goes down, 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 down. But if your cats get on your countertops like mine do, no matter what I do, color me a little bit concerned. Again, I wash them anyway. I'm not going to eat anything that falls on it because, even if there's no parasite, their paws are not dreadfully clean all the time. I don't like the idea of eating food or any food touching those countertops. But nonetheless, what does it say? Well, it says, there's not, you can't really, there's no research that says this is a for sure risk. But if you think of it just from a basic mechanical thing, that if indeed a cat were to step on something and then it, brushes off along the way, wherever that fecal matter is touching, could technically carry these, I think they call oocysts or something, the things that are shedded that could be, potentially be responsible for ongoing transmission. And so you would want to be careful with that. But it's not like microscopic parasites are all over your house if this is the case, right? So, the way I took from it, this does not constitute medical advice, but, what I took from that is like, follow basic hygiene, right? Like be sure you're cleaning countertops. Don't, if your cats are up there a lot and raw food is falling on this or even cooked food is falling, it's probably best not to eat it unless you recently cleaned it. And all of this to mitigate what is probably a small amount of risk anyway. So again, if that's of any help, I went down that rabbit hole as well, and it seems to be a lowered risk. So at the end of the day, I feel better about this, right? My cats are indoors. There's a huge debate for whatever reason with cat owners that are like, you should let them outdoors. There's no big deal. What's the big deal? Well, here's another reason not to, next to the potential risk to bird populations and stuff like that. This is a significant risk that could involve you yourself and your family. And so me having indoor cats and a 1-year-old, almost 1-year-old is like, whew, okay, sigh of relief in that regard. I can follow my typical methodologies and not be careless, but be a lot less worried about anything like this, because as much as they talk a lot about there's a parasite in cats and that can be linked to schizophrenia, devil is in the details as usual. So if you're hoping for a more detailed episode of why these things are linked, that was not the purpose of this, so my apologies if that's what you're getting into and hoping for. It's not obliging, more just generally speaking to it, and then speaking to what are the true facts around the risk of exposure. So as ever, I hope this is interesting and informative, and as always, thanks for listening. Stay curious. Ooh, unless I can't find my stop recording. There it is. Stay curious.